So, everyone, thanks for coming to my talk on using Git worktree to supercharge your development experience. Today, we're going to talk about how to quickly pivot into new work without losing your current work. To start, I'll give you a little bit of information about myself, if I can figure out how to use a computer, apparently. A little bit about myself. My name is Cory Knox. I am a software developer for Chocolatey Software. Prior to Chocolatey, I spent 10 years doing end user computing support for a large tire retailer up here in Canada. So helping with the administration and troubleshooting of the computers that the end users use from operating system deployment through to software deployment. My interests are in programming in general, mostly PowerShell, C#, and whatever language happens to be required to fix issues in open source projects. I have a keen knack of finding weird edge cases in things, and so I will find those edge cases, report the issues, and then often I'll fix them in a language that I'd never heard of until that project. So, to start off, I'll give a brief overview of what Git is. This is more of an intermediate talk about Git because we're talking about Git work trees, but just to level set about what Git is. It's a version control system. In particular, it's a distributed version control system. And that means back in the day, we had a central server that you would check out files from, make changes and check them back to. And you had one source of truth. Now you have it being distributed. You end up with a copy on your computer and every other developer's computer to work from, and you don't have to rely on the network nearly as much. Git is a form of a blockchain. It's not just for a buzzword bingo, but it is each commit on Git is cryptographically unique and is a combination of the file name and file contents and the commit message and all that, which is why if you rebase and make changes, your whole history will change, because any change to an early block will change all the ones in the future. Git is, contrary to popular belief, it is not GitHub, it's not GitLab, and it's not Bitbucket. These are merely services that we use to ironically store our distributed version control system in a central spot. And but most importantly for Git, it's a way for us to track our changes to our files over time, and with messages hopefully about why changes were made, and they're not just commit 1, commit 2, commit 7, but actually why we change a file. So now we've gone over a bit of what Git is, let's talk about what is a work tree. Now, a work tree is effectively a branch. And a branch in Git is you'll have your main branch of working. It's usually called main or master or developer stable or what have you, depending on how you have it configured. And then if you want to work on a feature, you'll create a new branch, and Git will track everything in that branch. And then at the end, you will merge it in. And effectively, that is all that worktree is that branch. And so that's the end. Thanks for coming to my talk. but in actuality, in all seriousness, that's the very basics of what Git worktree is, but it goes much deeper than just being a tree or a branch on the tree. It is a completely separate directory for you to work out of. For instance, if you have a test suite that you need to run, and that test suite takes several hours, and while that's running, you want to go and do other work. The way that I used to do it is I would, while it's working, I would open up a new terminal, I'd go to a new directory, and I'd do a git clone and clone down my repository all over again. And then I'd work out of this new directory. And then I'd run into the scenario of I have 2 or 3 repositories on my computer. They're all at different states of being in sync with the upstream service, whether it's GitHub or GitLab. And it was a nightmare to work with. Now, the other scenarios I've run into is I'd be working on something and I'd have a feature half implemented. And someone would come to me and say, we have this severe bug, we need to fix this bug before we can do anything else. And the way I would normally get around that is I would stash my incomplete work with the git stash command, or I would commit that work and give it a very descriptive commit message that says, this is temporary, rebase this out before merging. And absolutely never did we merge in a commit that said, rebase this out before merging. That was not me, that was someone that looks like me. So worktree allows us to not have to stash or commit those. But also the other issue that you run into is with untracked files. And so you're adding a new command in, you've got your PowerShell file up and you've typed it all in, but you're not quite ready to commit and you need to pivot and start working on this other thing. Instead of keeping that file as untracked or committing it and then potentially having to just remove it later because you decide that it needs to be a different name or something, you can use Git worktree. And so basically there are 5 main commands that I use for Git worktree, although I'm finding more all the time. Just before starting the session, I learned a few more worktree commands that I might be bringing into my workflow, but the main ones to get you started, there's kind of Git worktree, and then there's Git branch. And Git worktree has the add, and you give it a path to what your new worktree is. And so that will create that worktree for you. The next one is Git worktree list, and that will list all of the worktrees that you currently have so that you can kind of track what you have on the go. And then you have these worktrees, you're going to want to remove them. So we have Git worktree remove, where you give it the path to the old worktree. And then, as I mentioned, there was the git branch command. I use the git branch -VV. I'm pretty sure the VV stands for very verbose, and it differs slightly from the -V in that this gives you more information about your remotes. I think it gives you some pretty coloring, as well as it tells you the worktree if your branch has a worktree. And finally, if you've done any cleanup outside of Git, of like cleaning up your worktrees, you can use Git worktree prune, which will clean up the references to them. Git worktree prune will itself run automatically at whatever interval Git happens to set for it. But if you want to do it faster, you can just run the prune command. And now, as Fred would say, this is PowerShell and not PowerPoint. So we're going to go into kind of a demo of how to use Git worktree. So I didn't set this all up like I had planned, but I have the chocolatey repository checked out into this folder, and I'm on the develop branch. And so if I do a Git worktree list, I can see that I currently only have one worktree. This is kind of a fresh, just recently been cloned down. And if I were to, in this directory, run vagrant provision, this is going to run through the tests on the chocolatey software. There's a VM here in the background that it's going to connect into. It'll give us what appear to be errors, but those actually aren't in this case. And it's going to go and build chocolatey and then test it for us. But while it's running, we want to continue working. And so what we'll do is we'll do Git worktree, and we'll choose to add. And we're going to give it let's call it new summit feature. And what this will do is this will check if there's a branch called new summit feature that we have locally. And if there is, it will check out that branch into this new summit feature directory. And if there isn't, it will create that for us, but it will also do it super quick compared to a Git clone. So now if we do a Git worktree list, again, we see now that we have our new summit feature, which was created off of our develop branch. So they have the same commit here. And if we change directory into that new summit feature, I can create a new item. Why did it stop typing? There we go. My summit file. We'll call that. So we created a new file. We have a new untracked file. If we do a git status in this directory, we see that we have my summit file is there. If we were to list all of the files in this directory, you'll see that we don't actually have up in the directories at the top here, we don't have a .git directory. We instead have a .git file. And this is how Git worktree tells it where to find the Git. So if we were to just ask for the output of that Git, we see that the Git directory is in that chocolatey or that choco folder, and then it has its own place under the Git worktrees. And then if we change back to the chocolatey directory, one of the caveats about working with worktrees, though, is that if you're used to branches, you're gonna find that you'll try to check out like you would before. And so I try to check out my new summit feature, and Git's actually going to stop me and tell me, no, you can't do that because we already have it checked out. And so that's kind of one of the things that you will run into. But again, if you use Git worktree list, it'll show you those things. Oops. As well as the command I mentioned earlier, git branch -vv will show you all of your branches, as well as it'll put in parentheses like it does here, any that have work trees. And so if I were to add a new work tree for add headers, which we see is one we had here already, And we see that the output of this was different. In this case, it said it was checking out headers as opposed to before it was, if we scroll way up, what was the output before? Was, I think it was that it created it. And now if we go look at that, we see add headers is a new directory there. And now if we run git branch again, we see that it has that new one, as well as that it's a different commit than the develop branch, or really any of these other branches that I've been working with today. And so the other commands, as I mentioned, is there's git worktree remove. And so if we choose to remove the add headers that we just added, we'll see that git worktree has no problem with that. But git worktree isn't just, it's similar to git branch when you try to delete it. If you haven't committed all of the changes in it, it won't let you delete it by default. So if I try to delete my new Summit feature directory, it will actually tell me that it contains files that it hasn't committed into the Git repository, and so I would have to forcibly delete it. And if I switch over to kind of give an example of exactly why I started looking into this. So we've got this Vagrant that's running, and it's running tests in the background. But for some of our larger software, we use Test Kitchen from Chef, and we would run a command. It just says kitchen, and it runs through between 2 and 4 hours of tests, depending on which Test Kitchen we run. And so naturally needed to find a way to be able to work on multiple pull requests at a time, basically. And so if we come over here and we were to do a git worktree list, you see that I have about 10 work trees in here. And if we pull up git branch, I have even more branches than I have work trees. And I'm proud to say that I have lots of really good commit messages, like nothing to see here, and whatnot. And so the other thing about the git branch dash VV, as we'll see, is so that in this case, it's showing us that this one is gone, but the work tree is still here, and my local branch is still here. So if I wanted, I can do a git work tree remove, and which one was that? Feature tests. And in this case, that one has untracked files. So I'm going to, actually, I'm not going to forcibly delete it. I'm going to remove recursive force, and I'm going to just tell PowerShell to remove it. Because now if we do a git worktree list, what we'll see is that this one has been marked as prunable. And this is where I mentioned that Git will eventually go through and delete the reference to that work tree. But until it does that, I still can't check out feature tests because Git thinks that it's checked out. So I would need to run git worktree prune, which is, it does almost instantly. So I honestly not sure why it doesn't do it more often, but because now I can go and check out, although in this case, I can't check it out because, oh no, I did check it out. It just so happens that the upstream is gone though. So if I'm gonna switch that back to master so I don't forget. And one thing that I recently discovered, so I mean, I'm not Mike Kanakis, I'm not the command line ninja, but I prefer spending my time at a PowerShell prompt. And so I do a lot of Git commands from the prompt, but I also realize not everyone is that way. And one thing I've recently discovered is that Git Lens, which is an extension for Visual Studio Code, they introduced this feature called Git Lens Plus, and it allows you to work with work trees. The Git Lens Plus Professional, I think, is the tier you require. But if you have public repositories, it's free. Otherwise, it's a subscription service to have access to it, and it gives you the ability to from within Visual Studio Code, which is I'm sure where most of us are doing I hope most of us are doing our PowerShell from. You're able to select to create a new work tree, and it will ask you kind of which branch or which tags you want to base your work tree off of. So I'm going to choose this new feature one, and it's going to ask you where you want to store it. I'm going to go up a directory, I think, if I can, into just my regular Git directory. And I'm going to choose to create a work tree in that location, and it'll ask kind of like a few questions about how you want to create it, whether you want to create a new branch for it. In our case, I don't think it'll, oh no, actually. So we're going to choose, I'm going to choose to create a new branch and a work tree. And it's going to ask us what the new branch name is. And I'm going to choose to create it as a new, just call it new branch. And that's going to go ahead and create that new branch for us. And in particular, if I come back here and I do git worktree list, I can see that that new branch has been created there. And one of the nice things about git worktree is that you can put the worktree anywhere on your file system. In fact, it has a lock command this is one of the things I was just learned about just before now, that if you check it out to a USB drive or some other type of non-persistent storage on your system, you can lock it so that the automated prune doesn't come in and delete your work tree. So that it sounds interesting, although if we're honest, I'm not 100% sure on where my use case for that would be, other than if I check it out and want to give it to someone and then have them make changes and give it back to me. But in that case, I also would probably just keep it with using Git the way that Git's designed. The other nice thing about Git Lens Plus is that if you're at the command line and want to switch the work tree, use CD into that work tree, and then you would open up code from there or Vim or whatever editor you happen to be using. In Git Lens, they have this icon that you can just click it, and it will switch your Visual Studio Code over to that repository or to that work tree for you, so you don't have to open up a new one with file open, so you don't have to go file open folder or anything like that. And then oops, close that. And so it kind of gives you the work tree, that ability to work with work trees, as well as it gives you kind of the same view that it normally would for your commits, the same view that Git Lens does. It it shows you for the rest of your work trees. If I can grab no, trying to resize it, but it won't let me. Or maybe that's just as big as it'll let me get it. So you can see, like, this is my Summit file that we created, and I don't even have to change into that particular work tree because I have the new branch checked out right now. And then if I have everything. So we discussed the using Git work tree to add a work tree, list your work trees, and remove the work trees, as well as how to clean them up, whether you're cleaning them up outside of Git or inside of Git, as well as using Git lens, because in here it does also allow you can right click and either open the work tree in a new folder, but you can also delete the work tree. And in the case of this new Summit feature, this is the one that I have we have that uncommitted file on. If we try to delete it, it will prompt us just like Git did. But unlike Git, we can just press a button and we don't have to run it again. Although apparently we have to press it multiple times. I'm going to switch back to this one so I can delete this last somewhere. This last one. And then we'll do that. And if I find PowerPoint, the one thing that or additional resources that I found is that there's the overall Git website itself. Although it can get really deep into the weeds, I find that if you spend some time to understand what it's trying to say to you, then they can actually be really helpful. As well as there's, as I mentioned, there's Git Lens, which is now by Git Kraken. They were purchased a few months ago, and I want to say shortly after that is when they announced the Git Lens Plus. So, and with that, were there any questions about Git Lens or Git in general? Not in particular. So the question was if there was anything different about pull requests when using a Git work tree. So a Git work tree is effectively just a branch. So it would be the same as your regular pull request workflow, where you would do the work on the branch itself, and you're able to commit in that work tree directory instead of, you don't have to switch back to the main Git directory or anything like that. So just put this one back up. No, that didn't work the way I wanted. Put this slide back up for a minute just to go over again that the kind of 5 main commands. It was 4 when I was first doing this, and about 3 times through until I realized that I wrote the word 5 at the top and only put 4 lists on. So those are the Git work tree add, work tree list, and work tree remove are kind of the main work tree ones. And then work tree, or not work tree, Git branch -VV to list everything out in like plenty of detail. And finally, Git work tree prune will handle if you delete any the files outside of running Git commands to clean up. Like, so if you delete the work tree, then prune will handle that for you. I can, as far as how to contact me outside of here, I'm on Twitter as Cory Knox. I'm on GitHub and GitLab as Corbob. I'm also on the PowerShell Slack and Discord server. I want to say it's either Corbob or Cory on both of those servers. Discord is definitely where I would be easier to contact than the community Slack server. I also have a website at coryknox.dev where I blog regularly for large values of regularly, usually approaching 2 to 3 years, but it is there. So, and that is all I have for that. So stop sharing my screen. There is also, I had stickers because I was going to be there in person at Chocolatey and a Awkward Monkey one. I also ordered stickers and shipped them to Stevie Coaster because apparently I can order stickers and get them quicker than I can get a passport, because my passport will either, I'm sure, show up today or tomorrow or whatnot, which unfortunately isn't early enough for me to be there in person. All right, thank you.